All right, I'm just going to jump right in. Welcome to Most Writers Are Fans, the podcast that explores the intersection of writing and fandom. My name is Terry Bartley, and I'm your host. Today, I am joined by Branden Lyesmith, who is a tarot reader here in, for some reason, Santa Clarita. I've been driving all over the country, so it's hard to remember places. So I'm here in Santa Clarita, California, and I'm doing a live show here at the Open Book, this really cool bookstore in the area. So usually these intros happen with me just kind of by myself, but since I've had guests with me, I've been inviting them to be part of it because it seems silly to be like, I'm just going to do a monologue while you're sitting here next to me. So just sort of let's chat a little bit about your day. How have you been doing?
Good, actually. So I'm here now every other Wednesday at the Open Book Club, and today's been really nice having people come randomly. Really love that. It's a big difference from sitting in an office and waiting for people to show up. So the shift for how many different people are coming in it really makes the day wonderful.
Yeah. So my day's been a bit. Today's been good, but this past week has been quite an experience for me. So I've been in California for about a week now. Like I'm going on a week. I was in San Francisco a few days ago. Been in LA for a couple of days. My friend Gabriel took me to a rock show. Rock show? Is that indie pop rock show?
Early 2000s warp.
Yeah, like a pop rock show at the Roxy. So I got to go to like a pretty cool LA club. And then I've been in Santa Clarita for a couple of days. I had a tourist day in Ojai where I did a bunch of EZA tourism. So that was like a fun time. But then a couple of days ago, I tore my calf muscle, and I've been walking on crutches for a couple of days now also. So it's been an experience. But it's been a good time. Overall, my experience in California has been a good time. Just these minor things have made it less convenient than I would have preferred. But no, I mean, I think it's been pretty fun to be here. How long have you been in California?
Oh my! I've been in California since '98. So that puts us at what? How many years now? Over 20 at least? Over 20 years, at least, in California. I did just move here to Los Angeles about 15 years ago. I've been up and down the state since then. Ojai is actually one of my favorite places. Not a place I've lived, but it is one of my favorite places. Up by San Francisco, if you go further to Humboldt County, that's also a place that I would really recommend visiting if you're in California for a little bit longer. Or if you have to go up that direction.
All right, so if I were not live, if I were recording the podcast, I would do a break here where we just transfer into the first segment. But we're here in person, so we're just going to go on into the first segment. Branden, I just want to chat a little bit about like your experience of like what got you into doing, what you do now. Like what led you to tarot reading and all of this, however you would describe what you do.
Well, when I was 4 years old, the story that I tell everybody, when I was 4 years old, I was sitting at my grandparents' 5 years old. I was sitting at my grandparents' house, and a deck of playing cards appeared on the dining room table when I went from one room to the next. Since then, I've just been reading cards. It started out with cartomancy, which is playing cards, and it's evolved into tarot. When I was 22, 23, is when I actually got my first set of tarot. And since then, I've just been experimenting and playing around with a lot of other different forms of divination. So I do, at least 15 different forms of divination.
Yeah, so just run through a couple of those, some highlights.
Well, there's tarot, there's oracle, there's runes. I can read coffee grounds or tea leaves if I want to, though I don't like the mess, so I don't.
You tend to not want to.
I tend to not want to. I do candle reading, I do smoke reading, I do fire reading, I do also channeling. So it's a little different than mediumship. I can actually channel the spirit of the thing. So if somebody wants to talk to the chair that's in front of me, I can probably talk about who has sat in that chair and tell you history of who was just there. I like going to haunted places also and reading the houses. I love going to people's houses to do cleansings and say, well, you guys got to stop fighting by the stairs and you got to start making more love over here in the kitchen. That type of stuff. Most people don't tend to do things like that. They just say, oh yeah, this is the wrong energy or this is the right energy. I like to get down to the nitty gritty. Being ADHD, I like to really get into the nitty gritty of things.
Yeah.
So what I tend to offer is not your average tarot readings or your average oracle readings or your average any type of anything. I do nothing average. I do nothing basic. So that is not something anybody is going to get from me.
Yeah, I found all this really compelling as a fantasy author because, like, I have magic in my world. One of the kinds of magic I call divination. I use it as more of like a broad term for like any kind of like identification magic, as well as like things like, you know, fortune telling, things like that. So I would love to hear like your take on like fictional versions of it. Like, have you seen any that you like? Have you seen any that you really, really don't like? Like, what has stood out in your head? Like when I say that, like what comes to your head?
Harry Potter actually comes to my mind. That's what we all tend to gravitate towards when we're thinking magic in modern day. I do notice that throughout the Harry Potter series that she did actually add a lot of correct Latin terminologies to create spells. So that's something that I really like. That is something that has played really heavy into magic in roles since Latin days, since Roman days, since those old days when we were actually deciding what type of language we were going to describe or agree upon. Latin has always been in that background, and you'll see it throughout different countries where Latin is used and incorporated into their magic in and of itself. Personally, me, I like watching Guillermo del Toro movies because he adds runes, the Elder Futhark runes, into his stories. He'll always have something on the wall, or he'll have a book, and if you stop and read those, you can actually tell what it's talking about. I forget exactly which one of the movies it was, but it was the one that he did about the tooth fairies. Over the fireplace in the basement, he actually had written in runes, "Beware the teeth eaters." And that's so spot on for tooth fairies.
Yeah, and that's fun because, like, I feel like probably oftentimes, and you probably can tell whether this is true or not, I feel like oftentimes probably it's like set dressing, right? Like they just pick random runes and throw it on a wall in probably most things. So it's very cool that Guillermo del Toro actually like takes the time to pick out the correct ones.
That's what I really like, is when I can actually watch these things or listen to music and they have it correct. They have it the way that people still to this day, either now modern approaches, or they approached it this way back in the days of, say, my ancestors. I don't know your background, but my ancestors would use this frequently. My family still has books of people having used this for so long. And I remember seeing that as a child, where there were just a few family heirlooms and a few family books where it's scrawled in the margin.
So what do you think, because I mean, like, obviously you're probably also a fan of like things like fantasy, like you stopped and looked at my book whenever you walked by. What do you feel like is the difference for you? Like, what do you get out of like reading a book that's like very fantastical, that has like lots of like bombastic magic, versus like the real life where you do have like things that are still kind of fantastical, you know what I mean?
When I read books that go about magical, fantastical, bombastic, or any of that sort, I always wish that we could do that here in real life, that I could just snap my fingers and boom, the candles are now lit, so I don't have to walk into an empty, dark house. I'm sure somewhere we still have that energy. I'm sure of it. If our ancestors talked about it a lot, the stories spoke about it a lot, if it's in the creative field of writers, I'm sure it's somewhere within our genetics that we can activate or use these things. Quantum science is talking about how we can get closer and closer to these things. We're starting to notice all of these big changes. So I think that it's possible to do it. But the difference that I see with media versus real life is real life, we tend to just think small. We hope for the big and we think too small. Whereas here in fantasy or in media, it's the other way around. They operate small and it has very large changes, or they think large and it does barely anything.
Yeah. So how would you suggest we kind of like go about remedying that in the real world? Like, how would you, like, what kind of think big would you think of when you think of like metaphysical stuff in the real world? I'm sure you've thought about this a lot, so.
I have. It's actually almost a daily conversation that I have with myself, or that I have with clients, or that I have with other people that I randomly meet in the street. To give an answer, though, I have yet to discover a real answer of what we can do to change that, or what we can do in order to bring it more into reality. For me, I think, like, stop focusing on the world at large until you know who your world is internally is what makes the big changes. And if we look at media and we talk about, let's take fae, okay? Let's take fairies. When we look into history and we start looking at the way that they did their operation of magic, or they did their operation of even governmental systems, it's always about them first and then the rest of the world. We don't operate that way in most cultures, especially here in the US. We are constantly thinking of everything outside of us first, and we leave our internal world a mess. The thing with fae magic, or the thing with even the deities that I work with, that they push forward and that they talk about so frequently, is you can't make any effects in the world at all until you start learning how to affect your own personal environment. So if you can't heal from that cough, then how can you expect to light the candle by snapping your fingers?
Yeah, I mean, truly, like, that speaks to me a ton as a person that is pretty recently diagnosed with ADHD, because, you know, like, before I was diagnosed, before I understood my brain better and, like, how my brain works, there was a lot of, like, being hard on myself and, like, being upset that I couldn't do this or that, or that I hadn't gotten to this place in my life that I wanted to get to, or, like, forgetting these things was, like, a constant, like, stress for me. And, like, since I've sort of come to terms with, like, who I am and how my brain functions, I've been able to, like, forgive myself more and, like, give myself more grace. And that's led to a life where my brain, and I'm not constantly stressed, and I'm not as hard on myself. And I feel like I do have more control over my life now because I've sort of learned how I work. You know what I mean? Like, how I physically work. And I think that has helped me to kind of, like, figure out a path in my life. So, like, yeah, like, it speaks a lot to me that the idea of having to know yourself first, like, is important.
I like that you brought up, if I may, the ADHD. I've been ADHD diagnosed since 1988. So I've had only this in my world. I do not remember a time period where I wasn't, you know, non-ADHD, or where I was neurotypical, to use a more modernized phrasing. I think the ADHD and all of those symptoms that are going on is a big part of magic. You can think in so many different aspects, in so many different worlds, than staying solely focused on the problem at hand. You're operating on at least 15 different other ways of looking at solving the problem.
Yeah.
So I think that's a part of, also, when it comes down to magic, or when I'm doing my magic, I've learned you have to think about multiple access. You have to think about multiple ways. You have to see where these things are going to wave and you know, generate, and how it's going to affect not only your instant world, your immediate world, but how is it going to affect your world at large? How is it going to affect your hometown? How is it going to affect the people in your life? It's the same as if you decide to go from living in California and now you want to go to college in some random country. You've never been there before, so now you're going to have all of these things that you're going to have to figure out. ADHD allows you to put in all of that information, and it's a big part of magic in and of itself, I feel. Those witches that I've met, or those people that are spellcasters, or even artists or writers that have ADHD, even just a tinge of it, tend to see things in such brighter colors, tend to see things in a more substantial and realistic way than people who only think one direction. They think lighting this candle is now going to solve all of their problems. And then they finish with it, and now they realize, oh, I forgot to think about the people around me. I wanted money only for myself. But now there's all these people around me that are not able to enjoy what I am now enjoying, because they're stuck in a state of jealousy. They're stuck in a state of envy that I have been able to do something and make things happen for myself. So ADHD kind of fixes that in a way where you're able to, even if you don't input it in the initial, the aftershock, you can think of so many different ways to bring people into your space that allows them to see how they can grow from there and how they can affect their world as well. Magic for me is not fiction. Magic is something that we've always had. Every culture all around the world talks about it, even to this day. It's written on walls. It is spoken of in stories. It's passed over the fireplace. We talk about it on a day-to-day basis. We have media that talks about it being something that's outside of human control and outside of human existence. But yet we see how much magic we're actually, operating on a day-to-day basis. For those of you that can drive, that's a lot of magic in and of itself. The power that it takes to, focus on the road and every vehicle that's around you and to plan out how they're going to move and how you're going to move is a form of magic. So this isn't something that's, say, in my opinion, that just special people have. But those who have ADHD can not only operate the car, can not only operate and figure out all of the vehicles around them and their movements, but they're also able to project themselves ahead to their destination and figure out what they're going to do when they get to their destination.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So the thing that's a bit different about you with my other guests is that, typically, almost exclusively I interview writers, but writers as I use very broadly. So I interview game designers, songwriters, authors, journalists, all those kind of things. But I think there's something that brings what you do and what we do in common is something that I always bring up to the authors is that there's something that separates us from people that write as a hobby, which is that we think that we have a story worth telling, right? We think that the things that we have to say are things that people should hear for some reason or another. And I think that what makes you different as a person than other people, as somebody that is professionally magical, if you'll allow me to be a bit fanciful in describing what you do, that you feel your observations, what you do, is something worth providing to clientele, to the world. What do you think drew you into that direction versus just being somebody who practices this, personally?
Would you like the truth or something beautiful?
A bit of both.
Well, the truth is I didn't really have much of an option. For me, the way that I grew up, I was kind of left to my own devices, and I was also raised in very haunted houses. They didn't let me be. I couldn't sleep most of the time until I started learning how to tell them to, go away or to allow me to sleep. I also grew up in a house with my grandparents that definitely shared a lot of energy from all of my ancestors, that they kept their pieces. We had a sword from a Revolutionary War general, and he was very talkative. They tried to hide it in the closet, and I found it when I was 6. So things like that are... I may have lost the question. Beautiful. Truth. Okay. So to me, I didn't have much of a choice other than to get into this lifestyle. Beautiful, if you look at my astrology, it actually shows this is a part of what I'm supposed to do with my life. I am supposed to be that person that steps out and shares the experiences that say, these are not just fiction. These are things that we hold within us as deep memory. This is also a time period that we're starting to break out of that controlled environment that says this is all we are allowed to know. This is all we are allowed to believe. And because there are more people that are looking for that are seeking that, those of us that were kind of activated at a young age to learn all of these things, we're stepping forward now. So we're sharing things with people, telling hey, that dream you had where you were kind of flying, you may have actually been flying, just not physically. You may have finally tapped into something that your ancestors, your family members used to be able to do or can still do, but keep it under the wraps. We are just fresh from all of these generations and all of these decades of not being able to do anything. We weren't able to practice our dances. We weren't able to practice our life. We weren't able to talk about these things. If I go back even 20 years ago, it was tough to break into this industry. If you weren't someone that already came into it or didn't get trained under a human, you weren't really getting jobs anywhere. And now people like me, who we learned this from a young age, we grew up with all of this, this is a part of our whole existence, we're stepping forward more. So the world is opening up into a place that we can actually start doing things that's not tough.
Yeah, so I think that was beautiful. So yeah, you're right. So we're going to take a quick break. We're not actually going to take a quick break, so you don't have to go anywhere. But we'll be right back. We're going to talk about the idea of destiny, because I feel like that has a lot of overlap in what we do. And now we're back. So welcome back to What Most Writers Are Fans. I'm joined once again with Branden Lyesmith, and we're going to be talking about the idea of destiny. I thought this was an interesting topic for us to talk about, because you're a tarot reader, so you do, and various other divination tools you mentioned. So like you sort of reveal parts of people's destinies to them, right? Like that's part of what you do. And as a fantasy writer, like destiny is a big, I think there's a lot of storytelling potential there. You know, like you know you're supposed to do this thing, or you're going to be doing this thing, or there's a role you're supposed to fill, but maybe you don't want to do that thing, or maybe you don't see how you get to that place. And I feel like there's rich storytelling potential there. So like whenever you hear the word destiny, like what does that say to you? Just like generally speaking.
Your chosen path, but for me it's much more what you accept as your chosen path. You were given a specific statement, like you're supposed to explore and go to Mordor. Okay, let's use that as an example. You're supposed to go to Mordor. You can choose not to go to Mordor. You can choose the way to get to Mordor. But a lot of people, they hear just that statement, you have to go to Mordor, and they freak out. They panic. They only see A to Z, and they see nothing in between. So people hear destiny, and a lot of people panic. A lot of people aren't comfortable with that type of a statement. I try to use more language that isn't geared around destiny or fate, unless I see specifically in someone's reading, you have no other choice but to do this. Whether you try to avoid it or not, it's going to show up. And that to me is destiny. That no matter how much you try to avoid something, it's going to happen. In this lifetime or another lifetime, it's going to happen. Your soul has to experience this.
You have some examples of things you've seen like that? Like anything that like either surprised you or like felt very undeniable in the moment?
I gotta go back and think about that. There was one person that I used to read for the longest time, and they wanted nothing to do with entertainment at all. Their goal in life was to actually become an actor. They're now on screen. They resisted it for 30 years. And for a decade, I kept reading for them and telling them, no, you have to be in the spotlight. You have to be on screen. You need to be up there. And now that they're up there, you can barely pull them off stage. That's a part of destiny, is when you know you're there, you're there. This is home to you. Just like going to Mordor, you know you have to go to Mordor. You don't know why. You don't know what's there for you. But once you arrive, once you start exploring, once you start finding that placement for you, then you understand this is why destiny put me here. It can be uncomfortable. It's designed to be uncomfortable because you're supposed to be shirking away all of these preconceived notions. But for me, destiny is not something that really comes up in a lot of people's readings, except for people that are usually in my path of work. Then it's like, no, you have to do this because you're hoping to achieve this goal. This is the only route that your soul decided upon. And if you try to change it, it's still going to reach the same results. You've just changed the path to get there.
And just to kind of help it make sense for normies like me, how does that show up because you did several readings with this person and like just over time it became very obvious, like with the entertainment thing? Or was it like there were some very distinctive, like, oh, this is here very clearly? Or is it more visible because you did it regularly?
It was really clear from the first reading. Whenever I see somebody in their cards and the cards happen to have a checkerboard pattern, and the checkerboard pattern pops out for me. If I'm reading somebody's runes, and very particular runes stand out for me in the placements, if I'm reading somebody's smoke, if I'm reading any other form of divination and there are particular symbols that show up, I know this is now a destined fate. This is something that you have to go forward and do.
So let's sort of play out, like, the example you used of, like, Frodo going to Mordor. Like, had Frodo not gone, had he found some way to be safe, right, found some way to protect himself, like, theoretically, the world would have kind of, like, fallen down around them, right? Like, it would have kept getting worse. Is that similar to what you, or is it more like a personal, like, your life falls apart kind of thing, or you feel lost constantly?
They're kind of linked. How you feel about yourself is what you attract outside of you. And it's what you're going to see mostly outside of you as well. Most of the titles will pop out this way. Most of the news will be geared towards this. Most of the conversations you have will be geared towards this. And that's just the universe saying, get back on track. It's not yet finished. Keep going. So let's say that Frodo had given the ring to Tom Bombadil. He'd still be attached to this because now he would be thinking for the rest of his life, is Tom safe? Did the ring turn him? Are we safe? Is the Shire safe? So this would be something that haunts him and follows him day to day to day. He may escape it for a period of time where he's no longer thinking about it, but Gandalf shows up again. And now he knows, crap, now we got to leave the Shire again and do this all over. Or it could be passed down to one of his relatives that he came out with, but either way, his bloodline is still attached to this. So it's the same as inherited gifts that we get from family members. This is something that is meant to be in the family, so it's going to continue to happen over and over and over again until somebody gets it right.
Yes, I'd love to hear, like, your own personal journey, like, with this. Because, like, you talked about how, like, it does show up in people who tend to, like, need, like, who tend to do the thing that you do. How has that shown up, like, for you? Like, because I'm guessing you probably had readings by other people early on, like, for you, correct?
One. In my entire life, I've only had one person give me a tarot reading before I actually jumped into it as a business. That person was before I left to move to Los Angeles. I had a really lucky opportunity to sit down with a lady up in Chico, California, who doesn't see men normally. Because I'm LGBTQ, she said, I'll make this one exception. She sat down with me, gave me a reading. Every single thing she said in that reading has so far come true. And we are now 15 years past that reading. And this is where I know that was a reading of fate. Somebody had to deliver this message to me because I was not listening to myself. I wasn't listening to my spirits. How this all came about for me is this is kind of like part of my gifts or lineage. Both sides of my family, everybody seems to get something. My dad's, it's once a generation. On my mom's, it's really a grab bag. Whatever you come into this world with, you stick your hand in the bag, pull out. Some of them get a dud where it's like, oh yeah, I can read how many calories are in your cupcake. And that's as far as that goes. I mean, to really pull from media again. Others get something along the lines of, I can actually see fairies. My sisters and I, when we were kids, we had an oak tree in the backyard. And we would look out the windows and there were very distinct, different colored lights. You don't get that with fireflies. We didn't have fireflies that came in pinks and greens and screaming reds. We had the typical fireflies that came in that yellow. Growing up back east in the Midwest. So we knew that something else was there. Something else existed around that oak tree. We just couldn't get to them because they were,
Yeah.
fairies.
So how old were you whenever you had this reading? Whenever you, like, figured out what you needed to do?
22, 23. 22 going on 23 is when I had that reading.
And do you feel like how has your life shifted, like, mentally and things since before that and since then?
Can I use explicit words?
You know the bookstore that I do. I don't care about the podcast, but...
Fuck. That really is probably the only thing that I can actually apply to this is just Buck. To see how accurate she was and how much my life still applies and still operates off of what her words were. And to see that at the very end, she pulled a particular card of an archangel. I did not work with angels at the time. Since moving to Los Angeles, that has predominantly been the angel that follows and stalks me. Like, I can be asleep and all of a sudden I wake up and there's this flame standing over my head saying, we need to talk. So I guess it's kind of like one of those, by me. I'm glad it's me. I'm really happy that, I've had this opportunity that I can do what I do. But it still doesn't stop that why me situation. This is, to go back to that fate question, this is still something that I'm in discovery of, that I probably won't learn about until I'm ready to, enter the earth.
Well, and honestly, that sounds very like what you see in media and fantasy to me, which is like, out of all the people in the world, why am I the one that has to save it? You know what I mean? Like, why am I the one that has these magical powers that can do this thing? Like it is, I think that is a question that I think a lot of people ask, like whether it's in media or in real life. So yeah, I think that it's nice to hear that feeling of like, why me? That question is something that's resonant, not only as somebody that has an idea of what their fate should be in this world versus like people in fantasy. Like, it's nice to know that that's like, there's some connection there. Mm-hmm. So usually I would just keep going and like I have other things to talk about, but we were lucky enough to have some journalists in the crowd, and I have a feeling you guys are curious and have questions as well, because in my experience, journalists are very good question askers. So, do you have anything you're curious about that you'd like to learn more about?
I guess you were kind of talking about interviewing writers and such. What made you decide to do that versus kind of having something more open-ended and kind of focusing on writers specifically?
Yeah, so she asked about me being somebody that interviews writers, like why did I choose to do that? So this podcast came about because I initially wanted to I was writing short stories on a blog. I just wanted to have an external tool to promote those stories I was writing. That was really why this podcast came about. So I chose writers because that allowed me to attract, theoretically, readers, because the people that are, whatever those writers share out that they were on this podcast, their fans are likely readers who would then also potentially be interested in the things that I do. So honestly, it was just a ploy to try to get people to read my book. That was the real reason why I interview writers primarily. But what I will say, what's been interesting with this podcast is like, that's why I started it. And I really didn't envision doing it long term. I was going to do it for until the end of this summer, probably. Just as a way to because I'm doing it for the tour because, my book isn't out yet. So I don't have a book to sign. I can't do signings and things. But I wanted to still promote it before it came out. So the podcast was a way for me to get my foot in the door at places like bookstores. So really I was just going to do it until then, just as this tool to help me promote my writing. But what's been this fun surprise is interviewing writers, and especially people that are in a similar place to me, people that have maybe released a few books or are still kind of new, or similar genre, similar background, all other queer writers have been interesting to talk to. Is just I've been building this community of people that are like me, that have similar paths that I can compare notes with and become friends with, and have kind of a similar trajectory that allows me to see what they do and they can see what I do, and we can kind of compare notes. And that's been a really fun gift that I didn't expect. And it makes me want to continue doing this because it's a great way to connect. I would have never met you probably. I probably would have met you because I would have been doing this show, but I don't know if I would have had a connection with you and talked to you and stuff, it's very cool to get to talk to somebody like Branden and learn about these things that I write about that I really don't usually, I do research, but I don't talk to people about it,
I have a question.
Yeah.
My question is for Branden. So in your line of work, you've probably met a few skeptics. So how do you deal with skepticism and people who might not totally buy what you might be selling?
Okay, so she asked a question to Branden about how to deal with skeptics and skepticism.
Actually, I love skeptics. I'm an Aquarian, so I approach all of this with a bit of skepticism as well. As long as I've been doing this, as much as I'm into this world, I still say there's no way possible that what I'm experiencing is legit until I hear it from other people around me that they also are experiencing something similar. And then I take that into consideration and I still walk away going, nah, it didn't actually happen. So when skeptics come to me, I love when they come. I love when they sit across from me because that's my time to tell them things that they are ignoring. They tend to carry everything here and I read it like a slate. I tell them everything that they are saying no to. When they approach me and say, there's no way you're real. There's no way this is legit. Most times, if I'm feeling a little sassy, I'll take their hand and I'll actually put it on me. And I'll say, I'm legit. I'm a human being. You can feel this, right? This is something you can't deny, right? Sit across from me. Let me tell you about you. Let me read your life story before you even ask me questions. So this way now you can see there's no possible way I could have looked you up in that few seconds and found you on social media. I don't bother with that. I'm terrible when it comes to social media. You see my social media posts, I may post something maybe once a month, if that. So I don't know how to actually find out information about people other than the way that I have here and what my spirits share with me. Most of the time, our spirits love reading people to filth. They love spilling the tea. They love telling everything about a skeptic, just so this way they can watch as their face goes up. You know? So when skeptics sit across from me, I like telling them things about them that they wouldn't expect me to know. What they ate for dinner last night. Who your favorite teacher was. Or what subject was it? What should you be doing with your life? Oh my gosh, you have interest in that? Oh, here's your favorite movie, by the way. Now that I have your attention, what's your question? And usually by then, most of them are like, I didn't have a question. I just kind of really wanted to see that you were fake. I wanted to prove to the world that you are full of, you know. And I love it when they come. I've had someone come to me 3-4 times at psychic fairs that I've done that are self-proclaimed hardcore skeptics. And every time they would come back, I would tell them something new before they even sat down at my seat. I would tell them what they just learned from another reader who was in a room far down the hall from where I was sitting, and there's no possible way I could hear. And I have no time to check my phone from the time you just left to come this way for anybody to text me and tell me anything that you were just read on. So skeptics are one of my favorite people to read for versus people that are so into this that they're ready to believe anything. At least with skeptics, it makes it clear what it is that needs to be talked about and what it needs to be, well, what they need discussed. And they're also much more scientific minded or more wanting to find out how something is done versus just having that full faith and trust and saying, okay, I believe you. I think everybody should approach my world and every single world with a healthy dose of skepticism. This is how you prevent yourself from being taken for, you know, oh, you have a curse on you. You'll probably never hear me say that without me telling you, this is how you get rid of it. Here. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do that for people. Like, it's dirty. But with skeptics, a lot of the times it's just because they're expecting something that they see off of media. They're expecting something that they see on TV. They're expecting me to be Madame Zelda and transform this frog into a handsome, tall stranger in the next room.
Is that a thing you could do?
God, I wish. Gods, I wish. Then I wouldn't be single. No. You know, if we could turn our toads into tall, handsome strangers, why would we need bars? Why would we need these, you know, like these apps where you're only going to find people that want to send you pictures of whatever it is that they got between their pants? You know, at least this way I could control and say, I'd like someone I can have a conversation with. I'd like someone that can make dinner. I'd like someone that knows how to clean up after themselves, that I'm not having to chase after them and be like their mother and go, hey, pick up your plate. You know, if I could do that, I probably would be living in a castle somewhere in Scotland and living my life up like Enya does. Having nothing but, well, she has cats, but I'd have pit bulls, and I'd have a butler, and I'd have a maid, and I wouldn't have to pay anybody because I just made them out of clay. You know, like if I had the ability and the access to do that, I would do that in a heartbeat.
We said to think big, so.
And if you're gonna go, why go small? You know, if you can go to Disneyland, why would you go to Six Flags?
Are you guys have any questions? Anybody else have any questions for me or Brandon?
I guess I have another one.
Sure.
So for both of you, and I know this is really a generalized question, what was it like building your careers in this day and age? And just kind of coming to rather like a point of doubt of like, should this be what I'm doing? And then like also having those moments of just happiness and now you're doing what you're doing.
I'll let you start with this, Brandon, if you
Okay.
have an easy answer for this. Because I do, but go ahead.
So I tried to actually avoid getting into this business as a profession. I did everything I could to not do this as a profession. I worked in spas, I learned massage therapy, I worked for interior designers, I worked for everything that was completely not this. No matter what, Spirit always made certain this came across my plate. Someone would walk into my salon and say, hey, I recognize you from a party from 5 years ago. Do you still do readings? Because I'm looking for someone to do this party for us. Or, oh, hey, I remember you. I knew someone that said you did a house blessing and a house cleansing, and now their house is like totally nice. You know, I tried to escape this. I tried to come up with different names. Way back in the day, I had a completely different name than my actual name that I use. So I couldn't escape it. When I finally gave in, and I stepped forward and I started working at the offices that I work at currently in North Hollywood, everything just fell off. All of the other jobs that I had going disappeared, and all of my client base jumped up. So to me, that's a clear indication this is where I'm supposed to be. If I was anywhere else, I mean, it'd be boring. I'd be under somebody else's, pressure to be there between this time and this time, to only do what they wanted me to do. This gives me that freedom to actually, I guess, stop avoiding Spirit. And whenever Spirit needs to take me over, I can just say, okay, I'm in the right office, do it! And disappear for 2 hours, under my desk while I'm phased out somewhere having a conversation with Spirit. And then suddenly there's a huge line of clients at my door ready for readings. So this is something that I feel very strongly I couldn't avoid no matter how much I tried. And believe me, I spent my entire teens and my very early 20s telling nobody I did this, except for private parties where I went by a completely different name that's so far away from my actual name that there should be no way to connect one to the next. But I guess people recognize the red hair and they go, it's you, isn't it?
Yeah, so for me, to kind of answer it a similar way to Brandon, I took a lot of twists and turns in my life before I got the ADHD diagnosis. Like, I jumped job to job to job. Every job that I got, I would say to myself, oh, this is my destiny. This is the thing I was meant to do. This is the most important job I've ever had. And then, like, a year later, I get a different job, and I say the exact same thing. So it's like, well, obviously, obviously that's not true. And I think that it was just, I never wanted to stick with one thing, but I basically would jump to whatever the shiny thing was every time there was a new shiny thing in front of me. And once I got the diagnosis, like, I understood that that's like a symptom of that. It's something that I have to be like aware of. Otherwise, like, I will sort of constantly be jumping from place to place in life. So once I got the diagnosis, like, I had a degree in English. I got a bachelor's in English because I wanted to be a writer. Like, whenever I got my bachelor's, I was like, well, obviously I want to do this. This is a thing I want to do. So I just need to, like, make time for it and then just be consistent. So, like, I just wrote every week, once a week. I had, like, a day that I went to a Starbucks in my hometown. I just went there every week to write. And I wrote for, like, an hour. So, like, it wasn't extreme. But it was just having consistency, having a routine was, like, important to me. and like to stick with that one thing. So I wrote my novel that way, which is not this book. I wrote my novel that way, and then like I finished it, and it felt good to have finished something because I don't do that a lot as an ADHD person. And then I started to edit it, and like I really didn't know what I was doing. I really had done any kind of research into like what it is to publish a book. So then I started writing these short stories shortly after COVID started, because like once COVID started, it was like I don't want to do anything. Like I'm done. So then I started writing these short stories just as like a way to like be creative again. And I started just writing stories about the side characters from the novel, because I didn't want to write about the main characters because like their story is yet to be told. Like I have other things to do with them. So it really allowed me to world build in the world of the novel through the eyes of these characters, which is really interesting and a fun way to do it. And then eventually a friend like pressured me into like, well, what are you going to do with these? Like, are you going to put it as a book? Or are you going to, and I was like, well, it's like, it's on this blog. I've just been publishing it on this blog. But he sort of talked me into doing it as a book. And I'm so grateful he did, because it's allowed me to start exploring what it is to publish a book and like navigating all of this before I'm publishing the book that I like really, really care about, which is the novel. Not that I don't care about this, but like it's not the thing that I wrote initially, right? So like I'm sort of learning this process through writing this book, including like promotion and stuff too. And that's been a really fulfilling experience. But I will say, like, the more I learn about like being an indie creative these days, the more that I realize that it's like very, very, very hard to like break into it, especially to make a living with it. Like I'm on like every social media platform because you have to be, but I'm on like all the like book segments. I've got a lot of writers that I follow, a lot of other independent writers. I see them like celebrate things like, I got 5 sales this month, and it's like an exciting thing for them, and I'm like, oh, that's like successful. like it's a thing that I have really like changed my expectations of what I think will happen with this book. And the thing about doing a pre-order book is I have no idea what the sales are until I start getting them like shortly before the release date. So like I've been doing promotion for months now. Like this is a 6-month early release, and I have no idea if any of it's working. Like straight up no idea. And like that is stressful, and I like I don't know what to do. And I mean, like I've interviewed like musicians that I think of are as successful and they're still working like day jobs, because like being an independent musician these days tends to be like you don't make that much money from streaming, and you don't make that much money from like touring is like the only way you really make money. And then there you have to build a following to do it. So like even like people that I think of as successful aren't like making a living doing it. So it is a thing where it is challenging to break into it. And I don't know if that's been like discouraging or encouraging, just to know that there's other people that are like going through it, I don't have the answer to that yet. I'll tell you in about a month whenever this book comes out, like how I really feel about that. But it is a thing. I think you just have to like strategize and have I've outlaid that this podcast was a way to do the tour. And like the tour was always like an idea to go to bookstores to get them to like pre-order the book, to get them to stock the book. Hopefully, if it's on a shelf, then that's a marketing tool because it makes it more credible. Yada yada yada. But like it's been like this long, like really specific plan that I made to do this, and I feel like that's probably what it takes, is like having a plan and being dedicated, and then like following and seeing it through. And I mean, it has been cool the past month to drive around the country and like meet these people and do these things, and like it's really happening. This thing that I planned months ago is really happening. So, yeah, I think it is hard to build a career these days in the creative fields, but I don't think that means that it's impossible. That doesn't mean that it's not worth it. I think it's just kind of, if you, and that's the other thing, is like you have to know you're good, whether or not you really are. Like I have no idea if I'm actually a good writer. I think I am. I believe I am. But I have to like know I am, like in my soul, whenever I do these promotional things, because like you can't have that doubt, because it's like, why would people buy your book if you don't think you're good, So like there's a lot of that too, and you just kind of have to accept that the thing with books, and probably with any other creative media, is like you're gonna find your audience. Like whether or not everyone likes your book is irrelevant. Like the people that do like your book, like you'll find them eventually if you keep putting your stuff out there. So that's probably a long answer to the the short question that you had, but that's kind of like where I tend to land on that. So Branden, I think we're gonna wrap up. But Chad, is there anything else you'd like to leave people with? Like, if people that hear you on this podcast, this is the only time they hear you in their life, what would you like them to take away from this conversation?
Stop doubting yourself. when you find doubt, find something else that's worth dancing about. Find celebration. I find that things move so much easier and so much clearer when, like you said, you have to know versus believing. We have to move from just a belief. We have to move from just a thought. We have to move from just something that is, you know, in the ether. We have to start doing something physical. When we know what we're supposed to do, when we know there's something we need out of life, but we may not know what that thing is, get your body moving. Just move your fingers, you know, learn to crochet, learn to dance, learn to cook, learn to do things that's more than just going to social media and then doom scrolling. Because that's how we get locked in our bodies. That's how we forget what it is that we are feeling the need to do. And I find that people have more magic accessible to them. And magic does not mean, look, I lit a candle, to go back to that old trope. Magic is so much more when you feed people. I learned how to cook from Italians and Sicilians. So I learned by sitting at those tables with those huge families what magic actually feels like. Watching people go from being grumpy and unhappy of the work that they just put in for the day, and now, look, they have this nice meal in front of them. Someone made this with such love, with such intention. And if you just eat quickly, then you're eating for the body. But if you eat the way that we're supposed to eat, where we take time to savor everything that's there, taste the wine that's in front of us, enjoy the company that's around us, listen to the music if there's music that's playing, and we absorb that as ourselves. This is magic that we all have access to. And this is magic that takes the doubters into the state of belief. And then we take that belief and we put it into further action with our lives. We sleep better, we eat better, we operate better, we socialize better, and we stop trying to find who we are and we start knowing what we are, who we are, where we are in this place by simply enjoying everything that we are doing. Take at least one meal every single day and enjoy it. Don't get fast food as your only option. Try cooking something. If you're afraid of burning the house down, well, if you haven't burned the house down before, I don't think you need to be afraid of that. If you intentionally light something on fire, though, and then leave it out, yes, you're probably going to burn the house down, so make sure you have a fire extinguisher. Have two, just in case it's grease. But enjoy life. This is what we're here for. So many cultures from our past talked about this being a planet of paradise. That this is where we are supposed to be. This is supposed to be heaven, literal. So why are we not living our day-to-day as heaven? Why are we not going through something that says, I am enjoying brushing my teeth. I'm enjoying driving from here to there. Simple little actions are what create the larger acts of magic for us. We cannot incite magic on the large scale until we at least make a path or even clear a path for it. If you're hoping to jump all the hurdles, but the hurdles are stacked back to back to back to back, you're going to fall. You're going to trip. Your foot is going to catch, and now you're basically kissing the ground. But then you pick yourself back up again, and you try it again. This is what we're supposed to be doing. This is how we learn. This is how we find out everything that we really need to find out. We don't need to know where that celebrity bought their underwear from. Unless, we're obviously getting that underwear, but that's a totally different story. Spend time with yourself. Trust yourself. Trust that what you are doing is something that is meant for it. Obviously, there are extreme cases that we do not need to go into and discussing. If it's going to get you in trouble with the law, don't fucking do it. Just don't do it. Unless it's something like jaywalking, then different story. But if it's the big stuff, if it involves causing harm to other people or other places or anything else, these are not the things that we are talking about as being magical. We now no longer have to create such sacrifices in order to make things happen for us. Our ancestors did that. Our ancestors gave enough blood. There have been enough wars, there have been enough loss of life that we can start doing things that are more connective, that are more bonding. Learn someone else's culture for a little while. If you already know your culture, why can you not incorporate something else from somewhere else? If you feel that the way that your family has presented food all the time isn't right for you, but you like a completely different meal, start learning how to make those meals. Start learning how to incorporate some of that music, some of that culture into your life in a way that isn't appropriation, but is respectful, where you know why the music sounds like this, why the food is made this way, and why certain clothes are worn in that particular fashion. If you know these things, if you feel these things, if you've done the right education, you're creating magic for yourself that you are initially denying in the beginning. All the time that I spent with spirit, and it's been a long time at this point, it's always again and again and again and again to not beat up what you can't control. If you know that you can't get a job because someone else got it, don't sit in sorrow and cry because you didn't get that job. If you really wanted that, strive again next year. Strive again in a few months. Keep your eyes open. It wasn't the right time. I can't tell you how many times I read for people when they're looking for career advice and it says now is not the right time for that position. And they get so upset. But then they come back to me 6 months later and they go, you know what? It wasn't the right position for me at the time. That position ended up getting canceled out and the person that took it was fired. But I got something better. I waited. So if you get these readings and they say, wait, but find something in the meantime that actually fills your life with joy, that fills your life with purpose, and that fills your life with some kind of a dance or some kind of a song or something that is more culturally diverse and artistic than just staring at a wall all day long or staring at our phones all day long and going, well, another person got that I didn't get. Oh, another family member bought a house and I can't buy that house. So what? You can't buy that house. But now you don't have that mortgage hanging over your head. You don't have to deal with the lawn. You don't have to deal with those neighbors. You don't have to deal with any of those things. When you see that, it makes the way, it clears the path to get you to your own house. But we have to be willing to release the things that are stressing us the most in order to make actions happen or to make reality from the ether. This is how social media, we're constantly talking about, breaking the matrix or transforming our world or making something the way we want it to be made. How we do that is by releasing what we find blocking us.
So speaking of social media, if people would like to find you, you mentioned that you don't love social media. And obviously if people are meant to find you in their life, they will, right? But if they'd like to intentionally seek you out, where could they do that?
Probably the easiest is TikTok right now. It's the TikTok handle is Son of Hex. It's all one word. SONOFHEX. I definitely don't have my face on there, but I do have a few videos that show who I am. There is only one of me. Anyone that tries to follow me, just say hi. I like talking with people. Say hi. If you saw me here, say hi.
All right, thanks so much.
Yeah.
So I'll do a real closing later, but I just guys, thanks so much for coming out. This was really great. I really have enjoyed this. I hope you guys got something out of it too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was fun.
Yeah. I hope that this
Yeah.
I gotta get on.
Yeah, do it.
Thank you so much. Follow me. Let me know who you are on TikTok.
Terry Lit is my name. Terry Bartley Writer pops up, so it should be pretty obvious once I follow you.
So this is me.
Okay.
If you wanted the exact spellings of everything,
Sure.
send me a hi, and then link up, and all of that stuff.
Right.
But I gotta get going.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
We're running quick. We get the spell.
spelling of your first and last name?
Yeah, it's Branden.